We're going to talk today about the Byzantine Empire. Before we jump right into this, I want to make sure we're good with our language. World history studies, and certainly AP World History, refers to the Byzantine Empire as like an empire called the Byzantine Empire. This sounds really obvious and confusing what I'm mentioning. But we need to note that the people that lived in the Byzantine Empire, they did not consider themselves to be living in any empire that was distinct from what came before in the Roman Empire. So if you were to ask a guy that lived in Constantinople in the year 400 CE, which is like 76 years before the fall of Rome, the city of Rome, and say, what empire do you live in? He would say, the Roman Empire. And if you were to ask him in 476 CE, the year that Rome burned after these Germanic tribal invasions, what empire he lived in, he would say, are you nuts? I told you 76 years ago. How are we still even alive? We're still in the Roman Empire. And then if you were to ask that same guy 100 years later, in 576 CE, what empire he lived in, he would first say, yeah, he's dead. The guy is at least 176 years old. It's way too old. He would still say he's a part of the Roman Empire. So Byzantine Empire, the Byzantine Empire, was not really an empire in its own right, distinct or separate from the Roman Empire. The word Byzantine Empire for this entity that's centered on Constantinople and is going to exist for 1,000 years from the 5th century of the Common Era to the 15th century of the Common Era. 1,000 years of history, that's a lot of time here. This empire that we now refer to as the Byzantine Empire gets its name because a historian a couple hundred years ago was writing a book about the Roman Empire, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. And he really kind of ended his book with the fall of Rome, the burning of the city of Rome in 476. And he distinguished that from everything that came after in the Byzantine Empire as something different, even though people that lived within the Byzantine Empire didn't consider themselves separate from Rome. They considered themselves Roman going forward. Because to be Roman was like to be the greatest of the great in Europe. That's how it always has been, right? We go back to the foundation of a Roman Republic in 509 BCE. It's a long time ago. 5 centuries of Roman Republican rule, like this entity of Rome growing in the Mediterranean in power. And then it turns into the Roman Empire, and it stretches to even further reaches. And now, this is the Byzantine Empire here, but remember the original Roman Empire. All of North Africa, the Middle East, the Eastern Mediterranean, all of the Anatolian Peninsula, all the way across southern Europe, including what the Romans called Gaul. Up into, it's not even on our map here, up into today's Great Britain, or what the Romans called Britannia. Spain, this was all Roman territory. That was the Roman Empire, right? And then that's going to last, at least with the city of Rome as its capital, or one of its capitals, until 476. So that's another 500 years. So we're talking by the time historians start referring to something called the Byzantine Empire, there's been 1,000 years of Roman history. All right? That is an incredible amount of time with, they had two types of government in there. We got a republican era first, no king, and then an empire with a king, with an emperor. But 1,000 years of human history, that is a tremendously long time. We haven't talked about any civilization lasting for 1,000 relatively unbroken years in this class. The Han Dynasty, 400 years. And then there's going to be about 400 years of chaos and division, or 350 years at least, of chaos and division in Rome. We talked about the Zhou Dynasty, lasting from around 1000 BCE to around 200, but it was so loosely centralized, it wasn't really even considered the first of the Chinese dynasties. So Rome is there for a millennium, all right? A millennium is 1,000 years. That is a long time. And so the people that come after this Roman Empire, after the city of Rome falls, they still refer to themselves as Romans. In fact, later kings, eventually when Russia becomes an independent kingdom, what do they call the kings of Russia? Tsars, which is a Slavic pronunciation and spelling for the word Caesar, which was an emperor of Rome. So everybody is always looking back to this greatness that Rome once was and trying to hold on to it. And the people that lived in the Byzantine Empire, they didn't consider themselves anything separate from Rome. All right? So if you were to ask a guy in 600s, 700s, 800s, what empire do you live in? Roman Empire, Roman Empire, Roman Empire. It's only historians that create this idea of a Byzantine Empire. Everyone cool? So for our purposes, for AP World, we are going to consider the Byzantine Empire as like a new empire. But really, it's just a continuation of Rome. But it's a new empire. But really, just a continuation of Rome. Everybody cool with this? Sweet. This Byzantine Empire is the eastern portion of what once was the entirety of the Roman Empire. Do we remember when we talked about how the Roman Empire got so big, that in the 3rd century, an emperor named Diocletian called for a administrative division of that empire, of east and west. And I know what you're thinking right now, Mr. W., wasn't that Constantine? Well, Constantine is the guy that eventually looks at the writing on the wall and says, which one of these empires, the eastern part of the Roman Empire or the western part of the Roman Empire? Where was the money at? Where was the power at in this arrangement, east or in the west? By far into the great cities of the east, right? You've got Egypt, you've got the eastern Mediterranean, you've got what's going to become the city of Constantinople. That's where the connections are with the Silk Road, coming with all these riches coming from China. So that's where the money is. That's where the power is. Diocletian is the guy that says we need to split our empire because it's just unmanageable. It's too big. Constantine is the guy that says, hey, since this empire is split, I think I'm going to go live over here and be closer to this eastern portion. And that really starts to shift the focus of the Roman Empire from the city of Rome to the city of Constantinople. And that split is going to be one factor in the ultimate fall of the old Roman Empire. Because where is the focus of Rome now? It's more so in the east, leaving the west a little bit more vulnerable. All right. The Byzantine Empire itself is going to last for 1,000 years on its own, which is kind of an incredible note of history. And here's where we want to remember what babies the United States are in terms of civilizations or nations in the world. We have not yet hit our 250th birthday. It's coming, not too long from now, 2026. Some of you guys will be like entering your 7th year of college at that point, right? It's very exciting. Hopefully not. Hopefully you're out by then. But in 2026, we're going to be 250 years old. That is a quarter of the age that the Byzantine Empire would be when it falls. And remember, the Byzantine Empire is really just a continuation of the Roman Empire. So really, the Roman Empire plus the Byzantine Empire is 2,000 years of history in one civilization. That's pretty impressive. That's pretty impressive. But it doesn't last forever. And in the year 1453, the Byzantine Empire is officially wiped off the map with the fall of the city of Constantinople. 1453, the fall of Constantinople. We'll hit to this as we get to the end of today's lecture, but I want you to note something. We are right now studying what's called the post-classical era of human history, of world history. This era began in what year? Very good. Began in the year 600. The classical civilizations had all fallen. We're starting anew. We've got a rise of a Byzantine Empire. We've got a birth of a new major world religion in Islam. Does anyone recall what the end year of this post-classical period was? 1450. Nice job. 1450. Anyone take a guess as to why historians have decided to put that line right here? Yes? Okay, one factor, there's other reasons that are going to be involved here, but one reason that historians have decided to make 1450 this line of demarcation for a new period of history is the end of this Roman Empire, the end of this Byzantine Empire. Coolio? Excellent. So, why the East? Why the Byzantine Empire? We talked about it already, but this eastern portion of the Roman Empire, That's where the wealth and that's where the power of the Roman Empire was. It was more urbanized. It was more cosmopolitan. Do we know what that word means? Got it up here still. What does it mean to be cosmopolitan? Yeah. Very good. All kinds of people going there to work, to study, to live, right? So there's a lot of diversity in the city, bringing ideas from different parts of the world. The capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, or later the Byzantine Empire, was much more defensible than the city of Rome. Easier to defend compared to the city of Rome. Rome, we notice, is in Italy. And Italy itself is a large peninsula. But Rome is inland in that peninsula. Which means Rome can be surrounded. Rome can be surrounded. It's on a river inside Italy. Rome can be surrounded. And it can be attacked from the north. It could be attacked from the south. It's hard to defend the city of Rome. Whereas the city of Constantinople is built, and you guys might be able to make it out without my error there. The city of Constantinople is resting on its own little peninsula, right? So it is protected by water on 3 sides. So they only have to defend from land invasions on one side. And then around the other 3, around the water side and the land side, they've built tremendous walls to keep outsiders out. And so that capital is defensible. Even when the rest of the Byzantine Empire is going to be crumbling at the hands of a group of people called the Ottoman Empire or the Ottoman Turks. Even as the rest of the Byzantine Empire is going to be falling and being chipped away by the Ottoman Empire, the city of Constantinople will maintain until the year 1453. And then they've got tremendous access to 2 major bodies of water, the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea. Which mean, and then at its expanse, when the Byzantine Empire is stretching all the way through the Middle East, it's got access to the Red Sea. Which means all of the trade that exists within those seas, the Byzantine Empire can take advantage of. All right? Yes? Yep, they're the ones that defeated. Yep. All right. Despite this being considered by historians a new empire, there are some continuities. Remember, AP World always cares about continuities and changes over time. There are continuities that will remain with this as an empire. First, it will still have, like the Roman Empire always had, a strong centralized government led by one emperor. Sometimes kids, when they're writing papers for AP World, want to avoid obvious answers. Like if we needed to compare 2 governments. Well, if they both had emperors, then that's a good comparison. If they have one guy that is in charge of the empire, then that is a good way to compare. Because that's not the only kind of governments out there, right? Some governments are democratic, where people choose their leaders. Some are oligarchic. Do you guys know that word, an oligarchy? What's an oligarchy or an oligarchy? This is a government run by a small group of people. Like a small group of people would have a say. So the Byzantine Empire it's an empire. It's a one-man-led empire. They base their legal system on a written set of law codes. All right? On written law. That's important to have like the law written out. And human beings have been doing this since the day of Hammurabi, if not before. We just haven't found any of the ones that came before Hammurabi's code. Why is it so important to write out your law codes? Yeah. You could take them with you, and that's why we talked about the importance of like writing down your religious beliefs. They can be taken with you, yeah? Okay, it makes it easier to be centralized. Absolutely, one set of laws for a state. And yes, ma'am. So people can see them. So people can know what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. The Romans had law codes. Usually we refer to those as the 12 tables, and then they would be built upon as time goes by. And the Byzantine Empire will adopt up many of those ideas and then add further to them. One great Byzantine emperor, we will talk about him in a moment here. His name was Justinian. Justinian. You guys want to see Justinian? There he is. Well, there he is. Oh, he got a little marker on his face. Justinian, you're all messy. There you go. Looking good. So there's Justinian. He is gonna add to the previous existing Roman laws to create what is known as the Justinian Code of Law, or Justinian's Code. So they've got written law codes. And they're all Christians. The Byzantine Empire is a Christian empire. Shouldn't surprise us because the first Roman emperor that converted to Christianity gives his name to the city that's the capital of the Byzantine Empire. Who is that guy? Constantine, the city's named Constantinople. Those are the continuities. Then there's a number of changes. It will never be as big as the old Roman Empire. We'll go back to this map. The old Roman Empire encompassed the entirety of the Mediterranean Sea. But then it went further than that, right? All of Spain was Rome. All of what was called Gaul was Rome. The Germanic tribes that would have occupied today's like Austria and southern Germany, that was Rome. Britannia, the southern part of the British Isles, pretty much England today, that was Rome. The old Roman Empire was far bigger than the Byzantine Empire will ever be. And in fact, the Byzantine Empire is going to have its peak in size in the 500s, under that Emperor Justinian. And then slowly over the decades and over the centuries, the Byzantine Empire will shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink, eventually being overrun in the 1450s. So it's never as big as the old Roman Empire. Emperor Justinian tried to rebuild what was once the Roman Empire. He tried to put it back together, and you guys can see it on the map here, that like brown-orange stuff. That was the empire that Justinian ruled when he rose to the throne. And that's in the year 527, 527. So this is the Byzantine Empire when Justinian rises. And then over his reign, during his reign, he will conquer all that mustard stuff. He will conquer much of North Africa. He retakes Italy. He even hops into southern Spain. But nowhere close to the extent that the old Roman Empire once controlled. And then, can you imagine what would be a problem for Justinian and the Byzantine Empire for this rapid expansion over a few decades? Money. Why is it expensive? You're paying soldiers, right? And then what do you have to do as you conquer land? What's that? Compensate people, give them stuff. Okay, what do you got to do?
I said he's going to sell them to get even more money.
Maybe. Yeah. Okay, he's gonna build a lot of buildings to show the dominance of his government, sure. But yes, ma'am. He's going to build infrastructure throughout his empire, sure. That's going to be important. He's got to defend it as well. And remember, this was always a problem with any of these massive multi-ethnic empires that have been built that we've talked about. That's why Rome itself doesn't survive forever. Because you make it big, and then you've got to defend a big empire. And that's hard to defend these empires. You guys ever played a game of Risk? That game, you know? Roll the dice, you move, you got the little pieces. One thing about the game of Risk is that as you conquer territory in the game of Risk, you always have to leave armies behind to defend that territory. You can never, totally move all your armies off of a piece of the board. And so, as you grow larger and larger, now not only does Justinian have to defend all of these borders, but now he's got to defend this again. And he's got to defend this and all these African territories. So, this becomes very difficult and very expensive for the Roman Empire. Leads him to raise the taxes on the people. And how do people like it when their taxes are raised? We don't like it at all. Everybody likes their taxes to go down. No one ever wants to see them go up. All right? By the 7th century, someone quick give me a year that falls within the 7th century. I want someone besides you. I want someone besides you. Yes, sir, back in the back. 650, that works. Give me another year in the 7th century. 620, give me another year that's in the 7th century. 642, very good. In 622, something changes in the story of world history. What is that? No. Not the Abbasids. Not the Umayyads even. But we're getting closer. 622 is what? Yes. Year 1 of the Islamic calendar, right? This is Muhammad taking his flight to Medina to get out of Mecca because they're going to end him if he stays. So in 622, we have the birth of Islam. We want to have that year in the back of our minds, right? And rapidly, within decades, the Islamic world will stretch out of Arabia and start pushing in to the Eastern Mediterranean. And as Arab armies are pushing into the Eastern Mediterranean, they're going to run up against the great and powerful Byzantine Empire. And who is going to win that fight? No. The Muslims are going to win. Because all of this land, all of North Africa, all of this is going to end up being conquered by the Umayyad Caliphate as it is expanding across the world, across the known world at the time, right? So the Byzantine Empire has its high point in the century before Islam. And then the Islamic Caliphates are born and Islam expands. And the Byzantine Empire will now be on the decline. And this is going to be a slow decline over many, many, many centuries. Coolio? The Byzantine Empire will persevere. It's not going to be completely wiped out. In some cases, it's because of scientific developments. The Byzantines developed something called Greek fire to defend their ships on the Mediterranean. Greek fire is an invention of the Byzantines that kind of served like modern napalm, if you guys are familiar with what napalm is in like warfare. Napalm is like a jellified, flammable liquid, all right? Like a jellied petroleum, for example. And rather than like if you spill a little gas on the ground, and if it were to burn, the gas burns away really quickly, and then the fire will go out because there's no other fuel for it to burn. With napalm, which is like jellified, that will burn much more slowly and get on everything that it touches. And so it's much harder to put fires out and much more devastating, especially to wooden ships on the open sea. So even as the Muslims were pushing back against the Byzantine Empire on the land, they're not ever able to outright conquer the Byzantines on the open waters in the earliest centuries. So the Byzantine can continue to defend their capital city from naval invasion. All right? In addition to pressures from the Muslims coming from the south, later Byzantine leaders have to deal with pressure coming from the north with people known as the Bulgars. The Bulgars are where like people from Bulgaria hail from, like Bulgarians today are the traditional Bulgars. And as these Bulgarian people, or the Bulgars, are trying to expand their reach, they will come in contact with the Byzantine Empire. One emperor of the Byzantine named Basil becomes known, you don't really need to know his name for AP World, but you might like to hear it. He becomes known as Basil, the Butcher of Bulgars, as he so devastated Bulgarian populations and massacred people to try to keep those northern populations at bay. But we've got a lot of issues going on with the Byzantine Empire, and I think we can already see a weakness there, is that they're defending themselves on the north. They've got to defend themselves in their east. They've got to defend themselves in their south against all of these powers that are growing against them. That's very expensive. You got to tax your people more. That frustrates the people and makes them maybe even more willing to break from your empire. And so over many centuries, the Byzantine Empire will be chipped away. I'm going to talk for a bit about politics and political rule in the Byzantine Empire. So everybody sees Justinian here, right? Not Bulgars. Justinian. Now this is a very famous piece of art here. If you ever look for pictures of Justinian, that's probably what you're going to see is this one. What we see here is very much zoomed in of this picture. All right? This is a type of art that is distinctive within the Byzantine world. It's made up of little tiles and stone and glass put together into various shapes to make a design, and there we can see these guys. What kind of work is that? It's called a mosaic. So if you are coming across a piece of art that is in a mosaic style, it might very well be Greek or later Byzantine artwork. So this is Justinian, and he is the most famous of the Byzantine emperors. He's really the only one that the College Board requires you to know for AP World. Justinian is the leader of a strong, centralized government. And as the emperor of the Byzantine Empire, he claims that his authority to rule comes from God and God alone. That God has put him there and chosen him to be the ruler of the Byzantine Empire. He is God's representative on earth. And as we look at this picture, does anybody notice anything about Justinian standing front and center? Yes. Very good. He's got a ring around his head, or like a halo around his head. This is reserved in Christian art for figures like Mary and Jesus, people that are connected to God. All right? In this painting, the priests don't get that halo. I know. The bureaucrats, the government bureaucrats don't get that halo. The soldiers don't get that halo. Only one guy does, and that is the Emperor Justinian. In the Byzantine Empire, and in any other empire that might use it, we call this Caesaro-papism. Big word, and I'm going to get it on our wall today. Caesaro-papism. Caesar, emperor. Papism, or papacy, father. Like the Roman Catholic Pope is the father of the Roman Catholic Church on earth. Caesaro-papism refers to leader of the church and leader of the state, all in one guy. So in the Byzantine Empire, the leader of the church and the leader of the state is one guy. It is the emperor. It is Justinian, or anyone that comes after him. Combines religious and political authority in one. What benefit to a ruler would it be to have the religious authority combined with your political authority? Yeah. Very good. Nice word. It gives him legitimacy, right? People will see you as the legit ruler if they can be made to believe that God wants them to be ruled by you. So this gives him legitimacy. Can you name for me another empire, another society that put the religious authority and the political authority in one figure? Yes, ma'am? The Islamic caliphates. Very good. Umayyad and Abbasid caliphates. Mansa Musa in Mali, we talked about it. One of the reasons the kings of Ghana and Mali and Songhai saw appeal in Islam is that Islam had this notion of a political and religious leader in one position. So that's Caesaro-papism. Please be good with that. In the Byzantine Empire, it would be the emperor whose job it was to appoint the leaders of the church. The emperor would appoint the leaders of the church. In the Western Catholic or Western Christian church, won't call it Catholic quite yet, in the Western Christian church, the leader of the church is the Pope. He lives in Rome. Pope is just Italian for father, right? Papa for father. So he's the father of the church in the East, or in the West, pardon me. What is the empire that's going to be ruling the West after Rome falls? After the city of Rome falls? There isn't any. So there's just the church that's on top of everything. There is no strong government that the church is a part of once the city of Rome falls. But in the East, Constantinople doesn't fall. The Byzantine Empire doesn't fall. So you've got an emperor there who the emperor, will appoint the leader of the Eastern church, who is known as the patriarch. Patriarch. You've seen that word before. Patriarch, like a patriarchy. It is a male-dominated society. Patriarch means father as well. All right? Why is one using the word pope or papacy while the other is using patriarch? Well, yes, sir. Another language. What language do you think this is? No. Greek. That comes from the Greek, right? Just like archy is the rule by who's ruling, and we got a rule by the Father, rule by Mel. So he appoints the patriarch, which means that the emperor really has the power to appoint all those individuals in the church hierarchy. It's another word in there. Hierarchy. I thought we had hierarchy. Yeah, we do. The rankings within that church society. So the patriarch, and then the bishops, and all the way down to the priests. The emperor can hand out those positions to whomever he chooses. Most within the Byzantine Empire had nothing to do with their central government throughout their day-to-day lives. What the central government was there to do was to collect the taxes and keep the peace. That's what we talked about with any empire, right? Pay your taxes, keep peace, and you've got no problems. And that's what the Byzantine Empire did. If you lived in some of the bigger cities, though, like Constantinople, you would certainly come in contact with, let's go here, you would certainly come in contact with work that the Central Empire was doing. Massive building programs and projects were begun by the Byzantine Empire. This is the biggest. This is that church, the Hagia Sophia, in Constantinople. I'll spell that for you. Hagia. The Hagia Sophia, or Hagia Sophia. This would become, upon its construction, in the 6th century BCE. So this massive building, with an incredible dome, massive dome, was built 1,500 years ago. That's the inside of it. 1,500 years ago. So there is no modern machinery that existed then, obviously, to put this building together. Yet they constructed this 1,500 years ago. Yes, sir? It is still up now, yes. It is marked by its massive dome. This is very much its Roman qualities. The Romans were known in their architecture for the use of domes and the use of archways. So there's obviously a lot of Roman going on here with the way that this building is constructed. In its earliest days, it was a Catholic, or a Christian church, a Christian church. It was the biggest Christian church on the planet. Eventually, after 1453, when it's conquered by the Muslims, it becomes a mosque. So that's what it would have started to look like, where we see some Islamic script and artwork and things like this. It's converted to a mosque. But thank you, Ottoman Turks, for conquering Constantinople and not destroying this 1,000-year-old masterpiece of human ingenuity, right? Have you guys read anything about the horrid things that ISIS has done as they've attempted to expand what they call their new caliphate? When they come across things that they don't see as meshing with their interpretation of their faith, they just destroy it outright. Whether they be Christian churches or anything else, any artifacts that they've come across that predate Islam, they've just destroyed it. Priceless antiquities they've just gotten rid of because it didn't mesh with their interpretations. The Ottoman Empire wasn't about that. They did not destroy these buildings. Now, to be sure, they covered up some paintings of Christ and such that existed in the church. So they covered a lot of that up. They converted it to a mosque. But they never destroyed it outright. I was mentioning the other day, and I don't know if you can quite make it out in this picture, but do you see how, this is very much, kind of looking down the center of this church, or this building? And we see these 3 windows here. Everybody see these 3 windows in the back? And you can see kind of there's like an altarpiece. And it's set a little bit askew. It's a little bit to the right, right? You guys see how that's kind of maybe 10 degrees off-center? Remember how we mentioned the other day that when you pray in Islam, you've got to be kneeling towards the city of Mecca? This is what kind of takes because the Hagia Sophia, when it was constructed, Mecca, no one even knew what Mecca was in Constantinople. It wasn't an issue. Islam didn't exist. But when this becomes a mosque, you've got to kind of adjust everybody's prayers a little bit to the right to make sure we're all praying towards the city of Mecca. So, massive construction projects. What does having a building like this, in addition to just saying, we're Christians, what does having a building like this say about an empire? Yes? We're really powerful. Weak or poor empires can't do this. They can't organize this kind of construction. Yeah.
It's a luxury
It would absolutely be a luxury. There will be a conflict between Eastern Europe and Western Europe. And we'll touch on this more in the next couple days when we talk about Western European history. That's going to be our next topic. But for now, let's talk about what is known in Christian history as the Great Schism. A schism is a break. A schism is a divide. It's a break in something. And this officially is going to happen in the year 1054. This is not a year that you need to memorize for AP World, but if you remember around about 1000, we had a big break in the Christian church. You might compare this to the break in the Islamic faith. But that happened very early on, right? Muhammad dies, doesn't name a successor. Now you've got two sides that have different ideas as to who should lead the faith. The Christian church is going to last much longer before it sees a major break in its believers. This happens in 1054. So I want to talk for a minute about religion, Christianity, in Europe at this time, and how it's going to start to differ depending on whether you are in Eastern Europe or you are in Western Europe. In the East, we've already talked about how this idea of Caesaropapism existed. The Caesar, the emperor, was also the leader of the church. In the West, you did not have that idea. Because in the West, there was no powerful empire that controlled Rome. Right? Once the Roman Empire in the West falls, Italy, what is today's Italy, doesn't exist. It breaks up into a bunch of small little city-states almost, little regions. And no one city-state controls it all. Certainly no one city-state controls all of Western Europe. You've got different separate kingdoms that will be born and rise up over time. And so what you have in the West is no emperor that rules it all, but you do have a pope that is the leader of the church. So in the Western Christianity, you've got a pope who's number one, and then a bunch of kings under the pope. And in fact, in many cases, when those kings are crowned, when they have a crown put upon their head, naming them king, in many cases, they bring the pope, or they go to the pope to get that done. Like they will literally have the pope put the crown on a king's head. He will coronate or put the crown on a king's head. Why? That's a way to gain legitimacy. The leader of the church thinks the guy that's most connected to God on earth, thinks I should rule. That gives me legitimacy. In the Eastern church, it goes the other way, right? The emperor is choosing who the pope is going to be, essentially, who the leader of the church is going to be. Despite this and other differences we'll talk about in a moment, there are similarities between Eastern Christianity and Western Christianity. Quick question. Where are my Roman Catholics? What, a few of you? Okay. Well, not many. Oh. Our community has changed a lot over the years. Where are my Protestants at? Not one Protestant in this class? How does this happen? You're a non-denominational, maybe? You're not? Okay, hey, non-denominational folks, you guys are Protestants, kind of. You came along much later, but you're still Protestants on this. If you are Christian from a Western European heritage of some sort, you are a part of this Protestant tradition that began almost 500 years ago this Halloween. 1517, October 31st, 1517. That's when the Protestant Reformation began. Any Eastern Orthodox Christians? Okay, what Orthodoxy are you? Just consider Eastern Orthodox? And see, okay, in the Coptic order, yeah, that's one of the earliest traditions from the Coptic Christians in Egypt. So we've got different varieties of Christians, right? Regardless of what kind of Christian you are, just like regardless of what kind of Muslim you might be. Every Muslim, Sunni Shia, believes that there's one God. Every Muslim, Sunni Shia, believes that Muhammad is his final prophet. Every Christian, Protestant, Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, Coptic, or whatever, believes that Jesus is the Son of God and was born of a Virgin Mary and died to offer salvation to the world. Right? Every Christian accepts those ideas. Every Christian reads the Bible. Yes, sir.
Do you sound like
Yeah. The earliest Protestant churches were protesting something that the Catholic Church was doing. But what they started 500 years ago, was just this idea that you could even do that. Like, what? The church existed for 1,000 years before somebody was like, yeah, I don't buy that church, I'm going to leave. Because what would happen to you for centuries if you so didn't like the Roman Catholic Church, if you lived in Western Europe or in Italy, if you didn't like the Catholic Church and you were like, you guys aren't doing it right, I'm going to do my own thing. What would happen to you? You're a heretic. You might be burned at the stake. You might be tortured. Then the Protestant Reformation happens, and many Europeans start to break from this traditional church in Western Europe. Today's modern non-denominational Christians, in my opinion, are just following a lot of that same tradition. They're not Protestant in the sense that they were Catholic and now they're Lutheran, or they're not Catholic, they're Presbyterian, or they're Baptist. They are essentially saying, no, we're open to any. We just accept this idea of Jesus as told in the Bible, and any people can join this faith. You don't have to ascribe to anything. But even the idea that you don't have to ascribe to any particular denomination is challenging that traditional Roman Catholic view. So that's why I kind of lump them all into that world.
You're basically trying to say that Protestants basically are going off the Bible, but what separates them from non-denominational Christians is that at the very beginning, like from a long time ago, it was because they believed that.
The original Protestants were because they didn't agree with Catholics. But remember, anybody that joins a non-denominational church today, they're a part of that church because they don't agree with how another church operates, right? It's against, I guess it's against Catholicism, it's against Lutheranism, it's against any kind of denominational church. But the very process of being against one of those ideas or not agreeing with them is in and of itself a challenge to those traditional ideas. Anyway, this is getting beyond where we need to worry about today. Every Christian believes in Jesus. Every Christian has sacraments, important sacraments through their lives, from baptism to confirmation, to communion, to death, marriage and death. Yes? Like just things that happen within your life as a Christian that Christians go through within their life from birth to death. Different faiths have different sacraments or a different number of sacraments that they practice, but baptism is an important one. For Christians to be baptized means you're kind of like literally dipped in water a little bit or dunked in water, and it is a symbolic of like cleansing away the sins that you were born with. Because you were born with sins if you're Christian. Because your mom and dad did that. We'll talk more. Anyway. So they all believe in generally the same ideas. Oh, can I throw one more thing in there? It's a little controversial, but I don't think it's not true. They're intolerant of other religions. All right? Now, I think modern Christianity, or some branches of modern Christianity, have softened on this a lot. All right? But we must remember that if one is a Roman Catholic or any other type of Christian, you think anybody else that's not Christian is wrong, right? By the same token, if one is Muslim, they think all other religions are just not right. They're not following. They're not accepting the truth that you might know, right? And so these Western religions, whether it be Islam, Christianity, these tend to not be very tolerant. Take that back. Islam, we already talked about tolerating people of the book, right? Tolerant means to put up with somebody, right? It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to go like living a life in heaven with the rich rewards because you've accepted the tenets of a faith. So they tend to not be very tolerant religions. And if you are an Eastern Christian or if you are a Roman Catholic Christian, you are absolutely not tolerant of those that don't believe like you. And there is a lot of very ugly and very violent history in Europe that is directly tied to the intolerance of various religious beliefs. So those are similarities between Eastern Christianity and Western Christianity. There are some big differences, though. There are some big differences. And these differences become extremely pronounced as the Islamic world chipped away at the borders of the Christian world. Let's go to this map. Everybody see this map right here? On this map, we've got a city of Rome. Say hi, Rome. We've got a city of Constantinople. Everyone say hi, Constantinople. That's a tough one. Everybody say hi, Constantinople. Why are you always behind everybody? Everybody say hi, Constantinople.
Hi, Constantinople.
That was much better. I think she just got quieter, though. Everybody say hi to Antioch. Antioch. Very good. Everyone say hi to Jerusalem. And everybody say hi to Alexandria. Very good. All right, so these five cities, after the Roman Empire became Christian, these would be 5 centers of the Christian church. 5 cities around the Mediterranean that would become centers of the Christian church. We need to remember, guys, we're talking about like the years 200 and 300 and 400. It's a long time ago. If you lived in Rome, you never went over here in your life. You didn't take a quick vacation over to Constantinople. Most people would never travel more than 10 or 15 miles from the place that they were born. If you lived in Antioch, you probably were never making it down to Alexandria. So you can see, like, we're kind of dividing up a Christian world with different administrative centers. Everybody see that? It's the same thing that the Roman Empire did to itself, where we recognize that the empire was just too big to manage. Can't have one guy overseeing this whole thing, so they split administrative zones between East and West. The Christian church is going to do the same. But what's going to happen to Alexandria? What's going to happen to Alexandria? It's conquered by the Arabic caliphates, the Islamic caliphates. What's going to happen to Jerusalem? That's a bad marker. It's going to get conquered by the caliphates. What's going to happen to Antioch? It's going to get conquered by the caliphates. So we once had 5 important centers of Christianity, and now we're down to 2 after the spread of Islam. And we're down to 2. You got Rome, you got Constantinople. You're going to have a lot of jockeying between them. Who's the biggest one? Who's the more important one? When there's 5, everybody's kind of sharing a minority of power, a little bit of power. But when there's 2, each one wants to be the leader of the church. All right? And this rift between Rome and Constantinople will grow into a divide that eventually divides the Christian world between East and West, and becomes one of the most stark divisions of Europe, even to this day. People that live in Eastern Europe tend to be Orthodox Christians. People that live in Western Europe tend to be Catholic Christians, or, after 1517, Protestants and Catholics. We've got some big differences that develop over centuries between these two sides. For example, the language of the Roman Catholic Church. Oh, and please note, those of you that are Catholics, a few of you, what does the word Catholic mean? Anyone know what Catholic means? It means universal. The Roman Catholic Church feels that it is the Christian church. That any other Christian church has veered from the proper way to teach. Yes?
What are the different,
That's what we're going to talk about.
I know between each different...
We're going to talk about that. Like, literally, we're almost there. So the Roman Catholics, they feel that they're a universal faith. What develops in the East are going to be known as the Eastern Orthodox churches. Orthodox. Orthodox churches. The Eastern Orthodox Church. What does the word Orthodox mean? Original, by the book. So you've got one side that says, we're the universal church. You've got the other side that says, we're the original church. They both are claiming that they're doing it the right way. All right? They both are claiming that they're doing it the right way. We've got some important differences. What was the language of Rome? Latin. So Latin would be the language of the Roman Catholic Church. If you are Catholic, talk to or if your grandparents were Catholic, like maybe your family has changed over the years, but if your grandparents were Catholic, talk to them about going to church when they were kids before the 1960s. And every Catholic Mass was presented in Latin. To this day, if you go to a Catholic church, you'll still hear Latin songs and Latin phrasing, but it literally used to be the entirety of the Mass, except for the priest's homily where he's talking about something. The entirety of the Mass would be done in Latin. In the 60s, that changed. The Roman Catholic Church was like, whoa, no one knows Latin anymore. We better modernize a little bit and allow our Masses to be done in the language of the area that we're in. And that was called the Vatican II Council, and they changed that. Yes, ma'am? Mass is like a church service. Like you go to church on Sunday for 1 hour. That's a mass of people coming together. It's like literally the community of believers coming together to pray. The language in the Eastern Church would be the language of the Byzantine Empire. And what, according to your reading, was the language of the Byzantine Empire? Greek. Even though they consider themselves Romans, they take the Greek language because there's more Greek people down here. So Greek becomes the language of the original Orthodox Church. As we push towards the end of the first millennium, there's differences in terms of how the church is organized. Like what you actually see when you walk into a church. And the Eastern Orthodox Church had at various times, but certainly during this time, a fight against what are called religious icons. And it's known as the Iconoclasm movement. I don't know. Iconoclasm, I think it's like that. Anyway, if you go to a Roman Catholic church, you will see a lot of statues. You'll see statues of Mary, you'll see statues of Jesus, you'll see statues of maybe Joseph, the father of Jesus. You'll see what are called the stations of the cross, like a bunch of little steps as you walk around the church where you see little figures of Jesus and all the other figures he came across as he was going to be crucified and he died and everything. So you see a lot of things to look at, and people go pray to them. They pray at the Mary statue. They pray at the little statue of baby Jesus. They say prayers for their saints. Every church has a saint. And so there's probably a statue of that saint in that church. The Eastern Church said, no. We shouldn't have all these icons all over our church. We shouldn't have all these icons all over our church. We should kind of get those out of the church, and we should just be focusing on one Jesus, and that's it. And we don't need all of these separate statues around. The priesthood is different from east to west. In the Roman Catholic Church, priests are celibate. Yes, sir? Yeah, we can say the exact same word for them. Yes, absolutely. Good connection there. He's making the connection between what the earliest Muslims did at the Kaaba, where the Kaaba was used to worship to many different religious icons of various polytheistic believers. Celibacy of the priests. In Roman Catholic churches, priests are celibate. That means priests don't get married, and priests aren't going to have children or do anything that produces children. So celibacy of the priesthood. So when a young man or man decides to go towards the training to become a Roman Catholic priest, he is basically also saying, I will never get married, I will never father children, I will never do that. Because now his church becomes, like in a Catholic Mass, we refer to as the priest as the father. So he's got his children who are now the practitioners, the believers, members of that church. Eastern Church, they don't have that. The Eastern Church priests, they don't have this requirement, or didn't at least have this requirement of celibacy. The bread is different. This sounds like such a weird difference. Like, why would this even be a big deal? But in Roman Catholic Mass, there is a belief that Catholics have. According to the story of the death of Jesus, on the day before he was killed, Jesus had this Last Supper with his followers. And at that Last Supper, he shared bread and he shared wine with his friends and his followers. And he told his friends and followers to eat this bread because it is him, it's his body, and drink this wine because it is him, it's his blood. And this becomes this has become a part of the Christian Mass, or Christian church services. For Roman Catholics, it is the most important part of the Christian service. And for Roman Catholics, it is not a consumption of bread symbolizing the body of Christ and wine symbolizing the blood of Christ. It is the literal consumption of the body and blood of Jesus. Roman Catholics believe that through the priest's ritual that he goes through every week, that the bread that he starts with and the wine that he starts with are literally transformed into the body and blood of Christ. And then the people that go to Mass, they consume that. All right? When Roman Catholics eat bread, though, it doesn't look like any bread that you would buy at a store or make a sandwich with. It is like unleavened bread. There's no yeast. It doesn't rise. It's a little wafer. It's very thin and very dry. There's nothing much going on in there. Eastern churches, and if you go to church, your bread is bread. It's just bread. It's like a big loaf of bread that's broken up, and you have a piece of bread, right?
Yeah, I actually noticed, because I've also been to, the
Yeah.
Orthodox churches, in, the Middle East when I went to, Constantinople.
Yes.
Sometimes, depending on where you are, they all taste kind of different.
Okay.
A lot of, me and, my other, Orthodox friends who, come over to church on Sunday, we all like the bread there, but, anytime we go, to any other Orthodox
It's just different.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like French fries in Canada. McDonald's fries in Canada. They're just a little weird. They do something different with them up there. Maybe that's not a good analogy. I don't know. Anyhow, of all these differences, though, the absolute biggest difference between East and West would be this. In the East, the king, the Caesar, is the leader of the church. In the West, the Pope is the leader of the church. And this is not going to allow either of them to ever get along and see eye to eye with each other. In 1054, this comes to a head. And the leader of the Roman Catholic Church, the Pope of the Roman Catholic Church, will kick out of the church the leader of the Eastern Christian Church, the patriarch of the Eastern Christian Church. He literally says, you don't get to be in the church anymore. You're out. You're doing it wrong. And then the Eastern Church patriarch says, well, I'll kick you out then. And they each kick each other out of each other's churches. And forevermore, now we have two officially divided churches. This event in history is known as the Great Schism. Questions, comments, concerns?